I recognize the member for Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Thank you, Speaker, for the opportunity to comment yet again on another bill today on the on my birthday, Protect Ontario Through Free Trade with Canada Act 2025. I also appreciate this is the one bill that actually has been allocated the time necessary. It's also the least contentious, I think, of all the bills, knowing that we all want this to happen. My riding of Etobicoke Lakeshore is home to over 8,000 businesses. Many are trade exposed in the current environment. And as we've said, my colleagues have said, we are quite supportive of the need to open up trade within our country. And people are looking for us to act in unity, Speaker, on this issue, and make sure that we're acting in very pragmatic ways to mitigate the potential harm to our economy and give assurances to families and businesses. I will also say I was pleased to see that since I last debated on this bill, there have been more MOUs signed with provinces, and the federal government is really providing the leadership we need in managing the relationships with the U.S. and our allies to develop new trade opportunities. So, I think the potential silver lining of this whole situation, Speaker, is that we will be able to move ahead on interprovincial trade in this country, and it really feels like the right thing to do. So as we examine this bill, though, our job is to ensure that there's no unintended consequences of the new laws and how we adjust or respond to the risk to support our people and communities through that transition. So I have 3 points to really consider when we think about that. The first is this risk of the movement out of Ontario versus bringing key human resources or businesses back into Ontario. We've heard this from a few others, and I think this is a really important point for us. Secondly, that the MOUs, it's good to hear the announcements that we've got MOUs being put in place, but are they consistent? Are they consistent on standards? Are they consistent on expectations of each other? And are we pretty sure that they're not going to disadvantage Ontario in those relationships? 3, is really making sure that we are taking action and that we're quite transparent about the results that we see to be sure that we're getting the benefits we need for Ontario. So the current context really matters, and unfortunately, I feel that given the current state of housing, current state of healthcare, our education system, I do feel that we're far more vulnerable to some of the negative consequences, this idea of people maybe leaving Ontario because they're concerned. They might it might be easier for them to live in other jurisdictions than in here. I think that's quite real. And, I recalled before when I did this debate, I was thinking back to when I was the president at St. Mary's General Hospital. We had a lot of great businesses coming into that region. But the hospital, was getting really in poor repair. And we would have businesses that would come and would say, we don't think we do want to set up here, actually. Or we might have people who wanted to work in that community, but they were concerned that were they going to have the kind of health care that they needed. And so, we made a very clear case, actually, when we put in the application for the redevelopment of that hospital, which is much needed and moving forward, that you do really need to be sure that that basic infrastructure is going to be there. So on a larger scale, I fear in this economy, do we have the kind of foundations that we really need to draw on in this moment to keep people working in Ontario and fundamentally keep people healthy? Now, again, this doesn't mean we don't move forward. I really feel that we've got to move forward. We just need to make sure that we're managing that vulnerability. And, I think that the reason I feel that way is when I think back to conversations that I've had with constituents on their doorsteps, I was pretty shocked, actually, with the numbers I did encounter that were contemplating leaving Ontario. And the main reasons, some were young professionals, some were working in the trades, some were parents of kids that my own kids were going to school with. And the reasons they were leaving, they want home ownership as they're preparing to start a family that just isn't attainable here. And we've got a bill before us on housing. It goes a certain distance, but it certainly doesn't go as far as I'd like to see on things like affordability and ensuring the right mix of rental housing as well. They want to be able to have predictability in their rent, and we have no way of actually really offering that right now. And others cite the fact that they're just simply concerned about their health care here. And you know, when I look at what people are looking for from us, they're looking for us to make life more affordable. My colleague talked about tax cuts. These are the kinds of practical things that people are really looking for us in this time. Anyways, it was striking the number of times these reasons for leaving Ontario came up, and I think that they're just getting a little bit tired of tolerating. Again, I use healthcare as an example. This bill will allow 16 more regulated health professionals that practice in Ontario while they wait for the registration with the Provincial Regulatory College, that 6-month window. Again, this has great potential to help us here, but if people are tired of working in the kind of crowded healthcare environments that we've got here, they may choose to go out to the East Coast, or they may choose to go somewhere else. And that, unfortunately, leaves our healthcare system even more exposed. So we need to, I guess what I'm saying is, like, we need to act on what this bill is suggesting. Oh boy, we've got to keep our eye on those foundations at the same time. And part of what protects our sovereignty is that we hold on to what makes us Canadian, our core values, ensuring that people are cared for. And I just hope that that stays as much a priority. The second area I wanted to talk to is really about the MOUs. We've heard comments from a few others around standards and the adjustments to encourage businesses to stay. You know, I do think, as I say, it's good to see so many of the MOUs that are required being put in place across the country, and the federal government really providing that leadership that we need overall as a country. Standards have come up consistently from several stakeholders during the committee. I was reading some of the minutes from the committee hearings. And it is true. It seems that people are quite worried about the labour standards. Maybe they could be some sort of a metric on kind of understanding the implications of that, and the ability to report and track credentials, compliance, and some of the safety outcomes. So I'm hoping that the government is factoring that in, having heard that at committee, exactly the kind of process that you want to help to make things better. There's also a few things that the budget addressed, which are great, actually. Especially, you know, we used the example of microbreweries earlier, and you know, some of the changes that we saw that came with that bill will actually help those microbreweries in this context and for this to be successful. And so, you know, at least now they'll finally have the opportunity to compete fairly across jurisdictions, and in fact, they would have the opportunity to, you know, maybe similar opportunities that some of the large ones have had, and especially given that they offer much more a job-to-product ratio. You know, I also want to just say that I'll echo the comments of the member from Orleans about the LCBO, the revenue that it does generate. We need that revenue to actually, you know, again, manage this risk I just mentioned around healthcare and some of the foundations that we need to be able to rely on. And so lastly, you know, is really about action and transparency on the results. You know, we are going to enable these interprovincial barriers. It sounds like there's broad support here, and it's going to be really important that we know if it's working. And what will be that plan to measure and be transparent about it, both the negative and the positive in our economy. And I do really hope that the government will report to the public on that, and you know, will adjust if it's not going exactly in the ways that it needs to be done. And what's a reasonable time frame that we can expect to see some of the benefits of the interprovincial trade? Again, this government, unfortunately, it's part of why I ran, does have a track record of, you know, making a law, making an announcement, but not quite seeing the implementation through. And I think in this one, you know, again, we've got MOUs being put in place. I really, really hope that it'll be actively managed all the way through. I also mentioned in my other debate, you know, I'm interested to know who in the government will ultimately be accountable. We know the minister that has put the bill on the table But this is a true cross-government effort. And, I'm curious to know who's that single point person who will take accountability when things go well and when things may not. And is that the Premier, ultimately? But I think that we should all know who is ultimately accountable. So, in conclusion, we know the threat that we're facing. We have to be part of the solution, and part of that solution is right here in front of us in this interprovincial trade bill. And we need it to happen, but we also need to keep Ontario competitive as a place people want to come, not leave. Businesses will want to come, not leave. And, today in one of the other many debates that we've had today, we were commenting on the budget and what is there and what is not there. And I cannot stress enough that I have a lot of concerns that some of the very basic things, our education, our health care, our post-secondary education, all of these things need to be there to really support our economy through these moments. So I hope that the attention will be paid at the same time that we're implementing something like this. They cannot be ignored because of tariffs. In fact, they have to be the core to our competitive edge in this moment. So let's be sure we can be determined about the success of this bill. We'll look forward to the vote and supporting it. I want to acknowledge it was nice to be able to have a proper debate on this bill. I certainly wish, there's a few in particular, I really wish that we could have some more time at committee for, but it's good to be at this place on Bill 2 that will support free trade within Canada. Thank you, Speaker.